Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Moreton Bay Property Networking Group for our November 2017 video. With me today is Dan Scoogle from Mobs & Company Accountants, and Dan's going to talk about property and investment structures. So Dan, if you want to kick off with a bit about yourself.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Jeremy, and good evening, everyone. So basically, Moreton Company, we were a firm established in 2001. We're a three-partner firm with three offices located here in Caboolture, Sunshine Coast, and also an office in Brisbane in West End. We've got a team of just over 20 staff and also a financial planning arm to sort of assist our clients with all their needs. A bit about me, I started in 2004 and became a partner in 2008. I'm a CPA, a registered ASIC auditor, and my areas of expertise are small business taxation and self-managed superannuation.
Cool.
So just a little bit before we continue on today about a disclaimer. So obviously today is just general factual information. There's no specific advice here. If you're after specific advice, we'll be happy to help and tailor to your situation, but feel free to give me a call and we'll be happy to run through that. So I suppose we'd like to start off today with a little bit about structure options. So there's a few options you can have with regards to owning real estate. There are a number of unlimited options, to be fair. So we're just going to step through individual ownership, which is quite common, partnerships, trusts, both discretionary and unit trust, companies, and self-managed superannuation or self-managed super fund as a platform for holding property. Before we step into that though, I might just touch a little bit on land tax to give you a bit of a background around the rates. So land tax is a tax you pay based on the government's valuation on your land you hold in certain entities. You can see there for individual rates, it's sort of $0 to $600,000. You're not paying any land tax, and that's each. So in a partnership scenario, if you had land worth $1 million, each partner would have $500,000 applicable to their own individual rate, and it does not include your own principal place of residence, obviously depending on how much land you have there. The next one is company, trust and absentee rates. So as you can see, they're a lot different. It's the first 350,000 that's exempt. So whilst there are advantages to having different structures from a tax purposes, you do need to keep in mind the land tax consequences there too, which is why a lot of people do like to have different entities, because it does spread land tax risk as well.
I think that's one of those things too, Dan, just before you go on, I think land tax is one of those things that people often miss, isn't it? In their property investment structure, they don't think about actually putting it in there. So how crucial is it? It can have real effects on the profitability of a purchase, can't it?
Yeah, big time. It's going to increase your holding costs. If your idea of property is short term, probably not as bad, but if you're holding on long term for investment, it's definitely something that's going to have a big effect. And whilst it is tax deductible, it will depend on your effective tax rate as to how useful that's going to be, but you are still paying the land tax. So it is something you need to consider when doing an investment, especially whether it's going to put you, I suppose, well behind your own plans, or whether it means you're going to have to keep the property for longer to meet those holding costs. So yeah, it is a big concern, definitely.
Cool.
Alrighty, so yeah, we'll step on individual and partnership ownership at the moment. So it's quite a simple process if you own property in your own name or through a partnership. There's a couple of different ways, and Jeremy would be able to tell you more about that if you'd like to know more. But joint ownership and tenants in common. So essentially joint ownership would be your typical husband and wife, and tenants in common is probably more prevalent in scenarios if, for example, I was to buy property with someone unrelated. It doesn't happen to be that way all the time, just from what we've seen. There's lower costs in having individual and partnership ownership from an accounting perspective. The tax effectiveness is very good. So if you have a property and it's negatively geared in your own name or in a partnership, obviously you'll be able to enjoy those negative gearing aspects against your wages, income, etc., which is quite different in a trust or in a company. So it can be quite useful day to day in negative gearing sense. But when you go to sell the thing, obviously you're going to pay capital gains at your full marginal tax rate there. So the disadvantages are, of course, profit distribution, because you're limited as to who owns the actual property, asset protection because it's in your own name, and estate planning consequences there as well. So we'll just quickly go through what is a trust, because a trust is probably one of the more interesting ones we see. So a trust is simply an agreement whereby the person or company agrees to hold an asset for the benefit of the beneficiaries as such, or the others. So essentially in a trust, the trustee is the legal owner in the sense and is holding the property for the beneficiaries. A trust is a very interesting tool, pending what Labor may do in the coming elections. A trust is still a very good tool. What's of interest with the trust is you have discretion as to how you split the income, which is quite unique, especially with capital gains when you go to sell the property in the future. So the discretion means if you have yourself and your partner and children, if they're over 18, you may be able to utilise them in the future for income purposes to effectively reduce certain rates of tax, provided obviously you meet all the rules around the trust in doing so. The downside in a trust though, whilst it's very flexible for income, a trust can't distribute a loss. So if you do have a negative gearing scenario with a trust, that loss is retained in the trust, as opposed to individually where you offset that loss against your wages income and any other sources of income you may have. In a trust, that loss is simply retained and carried forward into the future until such time as the trust makes a profit or a capital gain, as it may be. So we've got two different sorts of trust. We have a discretionary trust, which is probably the most common one, or a family trust, as it's known. Obviously, as mentioned, the advantages are the profit distributions, the asset protection, and succession planning as well, which the solicitors could, such as Jeremy, could talk you through that. Land tax limits, as we went through earlier, so every trust obviously has its own limit set up as its own entity, essentially owned by the trustee, and capital gains for income splitting as well. The disadvantages, as we've mentioned already, are the wages. You can't offset it against your wage earning job. You can offset it if you have a trust that owns property in the same entity you're trading in, which we'd never recommend. There's a multitude of things you can do with trusts as far as distribution through other entities are concerned as well, pending, of course, meeting the ATO stipulations there. Annual fees are probably the other thing too with discretionary trust, and we would always recommend having a corporate trustee over your discretionary trust rather than individual, and I'm sure Jeremy would agree with me on that one as well from an asset perspective. But it also, unfortunately, does increase the cost, but like any good form of insurance, it's well worth it. A unit trust I won't go through too much. So a unit trust is a bit more specific, and we tend to find that's more prevalent for investors and developers. So for the average purchasing of a home and holding it, unit trust is not really something we see a lot of there. It's very similar to a discretionary trust in that the unit holders of the unit trust could be a discretionary trust. It makes selling portions of the unit trust a lot easier as well. But yeah, it's something that really needs specialised planning. So if you are interested in that, I'd be happy to take any questions. We'll step on to a company next to be of interest in a company. A company is its own legal entity. Unlike a trust, it's not its own legal entity. A company is its own legal entity. It can retain profits. It pays tax at its relative tax rate, which can be anywhere from 27.5% through 30% at the moment, depending on whether you meet the ATO's ruling on running a business. A company is obviously run by directors, and shares are held by shareholders or the members of the company. It can pretty much act in its own capacity. Unfortunately, a company for holding property, if you are looking at long-term investing and you're looking to merely realise a gain as opposed to doing something for a profit-making enterprise, is a company doesn't get the 50% discount on capital gains. So generally, and we'll discuss it further on, but if mum and dad are investing somewhere and they make a capital gain, they're usually available the 50% discount. In a company, you don't get that discount, although you do get a reduced rate of tax. However, once you pull that money out, you will be taxed at your effective marginal tax rate anyway. So if you are interested in using a company, I'd probably say it'd be more for development purposes, but we can step you through it. Yes, once again, a company's establishment costs are quite higher as well. So it is something to consider when you're doing any sort of investment. And one thing I would say as well with any investment or structure is it's always good to do a budget around these, just so you can factor in your costs going forward. We can give you estimates of that as can any accountant, but you really need to factor these in because your holding costs in property are one of the biggest things that are going to contribute to decreasing your gain moving forward or increasing your negative gearing. So, Jeremy, we might just step on to self-managed super fund ownership, if we could, please. So the advantages of a self-managed super fund, and the banks still are lending through self-managed structures, although it is getting a lot harder these days to do so. But it's a long-term goal. You got asset protection by having a self-managed super fund. It does get a lower rate of tax. You still get a third discount on capital gains in a self-managed super fund. Land tax is another consideration because it gets taxed like any trust for land tax. So you do have that $350,000 first cap. And obviously it's building for retirement. So one of the benefits of buying a property through your super fund used to be, and could still be, with help of a financial planner, buying it through your fund, and once you retire, there are certain circumstances when you can retire, your fund will go into a pension phase and you can have a nil capital gain there. There are of course many changes that came out in July this year, 2017, that will affect your, I suppose, decisions moving forward, as there are balance caps and things on how much you can have in super tax free. But for the average person, it is a very good system, and we've seen it work well for clients over the years where they've managed to save tens of thousands of dollars by having it in this structure, and then being able to pull it out tax free through a pension phase in the future. So it is a very good structure, but it's not for everybody. But you could always make your super work for you and have control over it through a self-managed super fund. But as mentioned, you would need to see a financial planner for a bit more on that one. So what I wouldn't mind stepping through next would just be the capital gains example that we spoke about earlier. So in this example, we've got Harry. He buys the property for $400,000. He sells the property just over 12 months later for $500,000. And 12 months is the key trigger for any discount on capital gains. You must have held the property for more than 12 months. In this example, he's made a $100,000 gain. As he's owned the property as an individual and he's had it for over 12 months, he's eligible for a 50% discount on his $100,000 gain. So he will only pay tax on $50,000 at his marginal tax rate. So it is a fairly simple example there. But you can see by having it structured, be an individual or in a trust, you will get the 50% discount, which you're not able to get through a company. So if you're merely realising the asset's potential and not doing it for profit-making intention or a development exercise, it can be a quite good little, I suppose, reduction at the end of the year. Even if you're at the highest marginal tax rate of around 47 through 49 cents of the dollar, depending on what year we're talking about, it's only 25% or a bit less that you're paying there in tax. But let's continue that example. And in this example, assume that there was a trust and we have flexibility of distributing this gain through a trust. Obviously, in a trust, if there was a husband and wife, even if it was just husband or husband and spouse or wife and spouse, we could split it however we liked per the trust deed. So the trust deed is very important in a family trust. It lets us know who we can distribute to. Anyone we do distribute to has a legal right to set funds as well. There's many things to consider when doing this, but if you set up properly, you can reduce a capital gain significantly. In a company, as we mentioned, there's no 50% discount. You pay tax on the $400,000. If you weren't running as a business, you pay 30 cents on the dollar on that $100,000. But the biggest thing we would like to point out is trigger events are very important. So when you decide to sell the property, it could have a dramatic difference in how much tax you're going to pay. As an example, we had a client recently who sold a property in the year that he stopped working. Now, he stopped working just before June in that financial year and sold his property, which works on contract date as well. The client didn't know, nor did he give us a call first to have a chat, unfortunately, in this circumstance. But he contracted in the same year he was working. It means that his capital gain was in a higher marginal rate, whereas if he'd done it in the next year, the year in which he settled, in which he thought he was going to have to pay the capital gains, he would have paid an awful lot less tax. So timing of these events is quite crucial as well, and we're always happy to have a chat before you do anything, and that's key. Talking to us or any advisor before you do anything is crucial to reducing any taxation or future problems down the line.
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it, Dan, that people often think that they can fix it later. but they can't. Things like that, once you've signed a contract, that's it. The capital gains tax is in that year. So that's why you need to get accountant advice to make sure that what you're doing is actually correct, isn't it? Because, in a lot of things, people think, I can just fix it up later and it won't be a problem. But these things, really can cause massive problems, can't they?
Yeah, it was quite unfortunate. We like to pride ourselves on our clients being able to contact us and knowing that we don't charge them for calls, but in this circumstance, the client just assumed that it would be settlement date, so he didn't think there was a need to speak to us beforehand. Had he done so, it would have been a much better result, especially when we're talking someone who's making $200,000 a year income, which puts any capital gains straight at the highest marginal rate. So definitely, I couldn't agree more. Speak to your advisor before you do anything. Just for that quick phone call, it could save you tens of thousands of dollars.
Yep, absolutely.
I suppose moving on to my last slide there, keeping in mind, things to keep in mind. What's the best structure for your needs and future goals? So like any good structure, it's not only taking on what you're looking at now, but we also need to fixate on the future and what may or may not happen or what your goals are down the line. So a structure might work today, it might not be the best for the future. Nothing is a one fits all. We just need to find something that's going to work best for your needs. And making sure you have the right team around you, making sure you've got your accountant, your lawyer, your planners, your real estate agents, and your mortgage brokers. You need the right team, and they all need to be working together effectively to make things work best for you. So you keep it simple. The idea in any structure is to make it simple enough for you, so you're going to save the money, you can sleep at night knowing it works right for you, and you're going to get the most out of your capital gain or your goals moving forward, be it income streams in retirement, selling, developing, whatever it may be. So, if you do have any questions, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email. My details are on the Moreton Bay Property Networking site. And we're happy to have a chat.
Sounds good. I actually don't think that the email addresses are actually on the Facebook page. So what is your email address, just for anyone who wants to email you directly?
Yeah, so if you'd like to contact me, my email address is all lowercase. It's Dan, D-A-N, at mobs, M-O-B-B-S, and company, ANDCOMPANY.com. So Dan at mobsandcompany.com, and I'll be happy to bounce any questions past you or come in and have a chat, and we can go from there.
Sounds great. All right, Dan. Well, I think it's always good for people to get a bit of a refresher on structures. It's something that you and I see every day, but your average person who is in property investment doesn't get to see it very often. So I think that was really good. Gave a really good overview of what people should think about. Anything else before we finish up for tonight?
No, that's it. Thanks very much, Jeremy. Thanks everyone for watching. And the key takeaways before you do anything, make sure you have a chat with your advisors.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dan.
All right, thanks.